The much anticipated, long awaited UFC debut of a man who's changed his nickname. It used to be the Lion, it's now Nocho, 23-0, Khusein Askhabov. And this is a guy with 3.9 million Twitter followers taking on a guy with less than 6,000. It's pretty boy Jamall Emmers, a guy who's fought a who's who, a much higher level of competition. And if you disagree with that, one guy's beaten Corey Sandhagen, and one guy's best win is former Cage Warriors title challenger Donovan Desmay. But Matt, when we do look at this for Askhabov, got to start in MMA just a couple of weeks after his 17th birthday. He's a combat sambo pro. He's won tournaments. He was a 2011 world champion at Yukoto Karate, and it really does come together if you do look at Askhabov's overall fighting style when he does fight some of these guys. Now, again, he was a champ over at WWFC in 2 different weight classes. He does have a brother, Khusein Askhabov, who fights in MMA. Now, Bellator fans might not like the other Askhabov because he just doesn't show up to fight sometimes. Allegedly, he didn't show up for the weigh-ins in his last fight. But when you do look at Askhabov and the way that he takes on the guys that he's facing, it can be a lot of single shots, but they are very, very flashy. And when they land, they really do not just make contact, but they drop these guys down. And for Askhabov, his flashy flare type of striking, it does open him up to, okay, well, maybe he gets taken down. He takes down his opponents off of his flashy strikes. So for Askhabov, I know a lot of people are going to like it. He's got one of the longest undefeated streaks in just overall MMA. The comparisons are going to be there for him and Khabib, but he represents the world's largest country by landmass, Luxembourg, and France. So very interesting for Askhabov.
Askhabov has a boxing record, and I don't say that to be disparaging of it whatsoever. It's just the case. He's beaten a lot of guys that we should have beat on the way to the UFC. But the thing has to be said, did he look unskilled in those matchups? Well, not at all. The man looked extremely skilled, and they are skills that I think can translate to the UFC, but I'm glad you kind of started it this way. Those single shots are very flashy, they're very impressive when they do land, but prospects of his ilk tend to go one of 2 ways in the UFC. Either all that flash really works out and it can translate perfectly, or a guy like Jamall Emmers, who isn't the flashiest of fighters, isn't the most, doesn't have the most fanfare, I would say, isn't even a guy who's in the rankings or anything, could just go out there with his lunch pail and just kind of 9 to 5 him, if you will. The fundamentals really do help, and I will be curious to see if Emmers can make him pay for some of the flashiness of Askhabov, because even in the last fight of Jamall Emmers, and that was a really long time ago, which is kind of wild. Like, I always think Sabatini versus Emmers was like 2 months ago, but no, that was almost a year ago now. I do think Emmers can have some of the similar success he had against Sabatini. Crack him with big shots. We saw him drop Sabatini. The problem is, what does Emmers do after that? Because once he does start to get into some of these more elongated grappling sequences, we have seen, I think, just a lapse in judgment, because that's the thing with Emmers. Sometimes his grappling looks really dominant. He can get into the top position, out-scramble guys, and be heavy, but the problem is, defensively, especially against a guy like Askhabov, I could see him struggle in that area.
Yeah, for Emmers, if you go back and look at it, it was kind of like a long, lunging uppercut that's able to land. It is the Marge Simpson that lands against Sabatini and knocks him right back, and they don't consider it a knockdown, oddly enough, he then hops right into top mount. Then Sabatini gives his back. Emmers has the hooks in with his leg. He's trying to get the choke in. They reverse again. He gets on top, and then all of a sudden we're Shawn Michaels against Ric Flair at, what was it, WrestleMania 24 in front of the fans and the family. Stuff. And Shawn Michaels is retiring him with the figure 4. Well, eventually he landed Sweet Chin Music. But there was a figure 4 there. And Emmers lets out a blood-curdling scream. And then after, Michael Bisping's like, hey,
the heel hook is a far more devastating technique, and unfortunately for Emmers, he may be out for a while now.
He could be out for a long time after this one. And boy, was he ever. That fight against Pat Sabatini almost a year and a half ago. And yeah, it does seem like it was yesterday. But the craziest part about Emmers, he fought Giga Chikadze in a fight where he's supposed to fight Movsar Evloev. He fought Vince Cachero in a fight where he's supposed to fight Timur Valiev. He's gotten ready for a guy in Evloev who's trained a lot with Askhabov at Tiger Muay Thai. He got ready in a guy like Valiev, who fights like Khusein Askhabov. A lot of spinning stuff, a lot of wrestling from Valiev. It's just, for me, when I look at this one, Matt, Askhabov, very polished, apparently a Dallas Stars fan from his Instagram. Who goes to the States and then decides, you know what? Jason Robertson, Joe Pavelski, they're the boys for me.
Like the Mavericks, I get it, but the Stars are a weird pick.
I'm going to wear a hockey jersey. I want to be warm in California. But when I look at it for Askhabov, Matt, again, I say how special he is, and his best win is Donovan Desmay. Even if you go back and watch that fight against Desmay, First thing that he lands in the first round, it's an overhand right, and he's catching a kick at the same time, and drops Desme down, and then he's able to kind of wear on him. And he wears, and he wears, and he wears. Third round, it's like the Paul Craig spin kick to Alonzo Menafield. What does Menafield do? Overhand right, drops him. What does Askhabov do? Grabs the kick, picks him up, and slams him. So I do like the cardio of Askhabov now. Guy that's 23-0, you think all those fights are 3-rounders? No, he's got some 2-rounders in there. And he's not necessarily a premier finisher, which is one of those things that, again, could go one of two ways in the UFC. Now, have I been impressed by Askhabov? 100%. I think this tape study, it was really easy to find the tape. It's out there very easily, and you can find a lot of these matchups. Did he beat a lot of guys that he really should have beat? 110%. But I do like the fact, Tiger Muay Thai, American Top Team for the training. For Jamall Emmers, Pinnacle MMA with Bobby Green and some high-level names that are there. But MMA Gold Team and Team Alpha Male as well. You're only going to sharpen that sword that is your wrestling. The time away, who knows? Still in his athletic prime at 33, he could still pull out a really good win. And favored in some of these matchups as well, even with that split decision loss that he has to Giga Chikadze, who went on to do really important things. So when we look at the overall, kind of gist of this fight, we have a look at the odds. This fight was announced back on February 2nd, so still fresh in the minds of MMA fans. And the thing that we didn't mention, Matt, Askhabov's been in and around the UFC for a while. He's supposed to debut back in 2021. That fight did not materialize. He was supposed to take on Joanderson Brito. He was supposed to take on Herbert Burns, and we were about to make the video for that back last July.
We were both excited for that one, too.
Yeah, and it didn't happen, so it ended up Burns fought Bill Algeo and then retired due to the exhaustion of the fight. But when you look at this one, Matt, in terms of the odds, Askhabov open minus 235. He's a minus 153 right now. Emmers open plus 200, plus 128. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprise to us, they are to you. I'm going to say over under 70% Askhabov. I think the fans are there.
I think they'll be over.
I think they're going to be over. They're way over. 259 total votes, 93% Askhabov, 71% by submission for the 7% that have Emmers, 84% by decision. Do you have the overwhelming fan favorite, the guy with the IG follows, Askhabov?
I do, but I have to bring up a rule that I talked about with Cyril Gahn forever. And it was, hey, I'm going to be way more confident in this guy once I see him in a very difficult fight. And that's what I'm going to say about Askhabov. I think he'll win this one. And I think it will be difficult, don't get me wrong. But I'll have a much better idea as to just what his ceiling is and how far he can go in this division after I see this fight with Jamall Emmers. Because the thing about Emmers is, even if he's not in his prime, even if you don't think the highest of him, he's a well-rounded fighter who's got pretty good cardio. So he's not just going to roll over and it'll just be first round submission win or knockout win for Askhabov. So I do have Askhabov, the undefeated fighter, but I think this will be a very difficult test for him, and that's probably what he needs if we're being completely honest.
Now, Askhabov hasn't fought since 2020, so it's been a really long time. The last guy that he fought, it's worth mentioning, Yusuf Heidi Vizingiev, who was 3-0 at the time. But my point is, he hasn't fought in about 3 years. I expect a guy who's going to be a few days after his 28th birthday to only get better, not to regress, rest on his laurels, just have the same skill set. I think he's going to be able to improve upon what he's had. The one thing that I don't necessarily love in a matchup against Jamall Emmers is Askhabov stands with his hands really low out of that karate stance. Then he's able to open up, throw his spins, then work into his takedowns. And once he gets you into the clinch, he's not necessarily looking to land knees or to land elbows. He's looking to then drop levels and take you down. And I like those things out of Askhabov, but not against a guy like Jamall Emmers. I think the meat and potatoes, the length of a guy like Emmers is one of the bigger guys in this featherweight division.
Do you worry about the injury, though?
I do worry about the knee injury, but not necessarily in this fight against Askhabov. I do like the movement on the outside, and I think the volume out of a guy like Emmers is just going to wear as this fight goes on. So for me, I like the underdog in Jamall Emmers. I hope we get to see the pretty boy that we saw coming into the UFC. Because, Matt, Jamall Emmers, low-key, for a guy that only has 3 fights in the UFC, we haven't seen him in a year and a half, he was a guy that in videos, we talked about him all the damn time.
I will say this, though. The split decision to Giga Chikadze looks way better on paper than the fight actually was. Like, neither guy looked very good in that fight, honestly. And Giga has looked significantly better since that, so I would never want to see that rematch for Emmers' sake. But it should be a really fun fight. Again, I just hope that Emmers brings out the best version of Askhabov so we all have a better opinion of him afterwards.
Matt going with Nocho, who was once the Lion. I'm going with Pretty Boy. He's stuck with it, but his knee probably looks like Greg Oden's after a little bit. It's a big-time matchup coming up this weekend. Can't wait for it! And some big-time fights left on this card. Mayra Bueno Silva's taking on Lina Lansberg. You're not going to want to miss it in the bantamweight division. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.